Hello and welcome to Teens Talk About Virginity, a podcast where we'll be examining the social pressures concerning sexuality from the adolescent perspective. I'm your host, Max Thompson. I'm a 19-year-old freshman at the University of Michigan, and I created this podcast primarily to give a space for young people to speak about some of the way that sexual terms like virgin, whore, bitch, etc. are used in youth culture. And also this phenomenon that occurs and is very tangible in our culture, where we assign connotations, negative stereotypes, images, behaviors, characteristics to certain words like virgin. For example, when you think of the word virgin, you don't think of just the word. You think of certain character traits. You might think of somebody who's antisocial, who's a little awkward, who's maybe immature. All of these terms are often surrounded with and connected to the concept of virginity. And I want to give young people, especially, a platform to speak about this. I feel like there is really no space where young people can safely and honestly talk about lesser discussed, but still deeply integrally important and effective parts of our society. This is something that has real effects on real people. Before I move further in, I want to establish a couple goals. First, I want to establish clearly that virgins or people with unique sexual experiences or whatever sexual experiences should never have to feel isolated or that something is wrong with them because of the experiences that they've had. There is literally no biological or significant connection between sexual experience and character or the soul or anything like that. When you have sex or don't have sex, doesn't make you one thing or another. I really want to establish right off the bat that these terms are so insignificant to the overall sum of our character. It can be used, maybe can be a little part of who we are, sure, of course. It is significant in some ways, but is absolutely not changing our characters or making up part of who we are in any really significant, important way where we should be judging people based on these terms, based on whether they've had sex or not. And a final goal, I want to establish that the way that we discuss sex, even casually, can have really harmful and discriminatory effects. In society, we sort of pass off these terms being harmless, use them as jokes, like virgin. Oh, you're a virgin, call your friend a virgin, make fun of your friend. And sure, that's maybe a joke, perhaps, but it is discrimination. It's sexual discrimination. Further, if somebody is a virgin and hearing that happening, hearing that word be used as an insult, it's pretty easy to make the leap to hearing something that they relate to. I'm a virgin. I'm seeing this term being used as an insult. There must be something wrong with me. That's a very easy mental leap. And so I want to establish that there's some really harmful effects that can come out of the way that we talk about, discuss, and interact with these terms. And so to explore this more, I'm going to be inviting my friend. For privacy purposes, we'll be referring to her as June. She's also a freshman in college, and I also want to describe right off the bat, she is a virgin, but she is definitely not the negative type of virgin or stereotype that we often see in the media. This is somebody that's a social person. She's in a top sorority at her university. She's loved going out. She has a bunch of different things going on in her life. She's abstinent for religious reasons. And so right off the bat, I want to define that, this person, June, is already contradicting some of the really negative stereotypes that we have around virginity. So June, I'd like to invite you to unmute and maybe say hello, and then we'll start asking some questions, get your perspective.
Hi, hello.
Hi, June. Okay, so right off the bat, I want this to be a very open discussion, offering your perspective. This is sort of a place for honesty and a unique one because I think that as young adults, there's not really a lot of places for us to discuss virginity and terms around that. It's sort of like a taboo subject, I think. And I don't know, it's sort of scary to bring up around other people. You don't want to be thought of differently depending on whether you're a virgin or not. And so I want this to be a safe space for discussion. Um, and just wanted to say that and establish that. My first question for you is personally, as a virgin, what do you think of when you hear the word virgin? Like, what comes to mind? Is it images? Is it behaviors? What do you think of?
I've been hearing that word more and more recently, I think. So in high school, it mattered less. And so I was hearing the word a lot less. But now I hear it more, and I hear it come out as like a shock. So when I hear that word, I usually am preparing to kind of defend myself a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, or it's kind of like a trigger word
Yeah.
where it's like I'm preparing for a discussion to
Yeah.
follow, and I need to like be ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a very charged statement. Like when you ask somebody like, "Are you a virgin?" I don't know. Like I feel like personally, it feels like I'm like whatever my response is going to shape the way that they look at me. Like personally, like I'm like and so I get a lot of anxiety from that question. Do you sort of feel that too?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do a little bit. I just also, it feels like a conversation that I've had so many
Yeah.
times that it's not necessarily a question that I want to answer because it's
Yeah.
kind of exhausting to
Yeah.
repeat.
Yeah. And that's something I also really want to address too is that it's like I sort of touched on this a little bit, but like sort of have a very weird way of discussing sex and virginity, especially like youth culture and like you said like in college especially like it's so I don't know, it feels a little it feels very a little invasive to ask somebody that, but it's also like it's so normalized. Like people feel free to ask that and also to like discuss that. And something I wrote a paper on this, and something that I discuss in that paper is a lot of the times there's like these uncomfortable situations where there's sort of there will be like sort of a group of people discussing their sexual experiences I just had sex with this person, or like this was so good, or like this and like
Mm.
I don't know, it almost feels like in those situations people are trying to like prove that they're not a virgin, like as if try to like establish and like get out there, be very open about like their sexual identity. And it almost feels like they're doing that to avoid, I don't know, some of the negative connotations that like come around virginity. And so I want to discuss that with you too is like, what do you, I don't know, like as a virgin, like are you afraid, or are there certain things that like you imagine people thinking about you just like right off the bat they hear that you're a virgin? Like what do you imagine that those people are thinking about you once they hear that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said first about how talking about talking about your sex life
Yeah.
is happens a lot, and is not really sex is not seen as like an intimate interaction between two people. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of something that you're gonna go and tell
Yeah.
a bunch of other people, which I find like a little weird.
Yeah.
um but as far as what I think I'm being perceived as when I tell people I'm a virgin,
Mm-hmm.
um I think it definitely varies. If my relationship to the person is like acquaintance stranger level, then I think that like those are probably my least favorite interactions,
Mm-hmm.
because you just kind of like see an expression on their face.
Yeah.
uh, and then they're obviously like thinking things but not saying those things, and those things are probably like judgmental.
Yeah.
uh, but with my close friends who know me like outside of that
Yeah.
context, and who can kind of
Yeah.
see where that part of me comes from, and understand why I've made that decision, I think that um are totally supportive and like even admire
Mm.
that part of me.
I love that. Yeah, I completely. That's really interesting, and I'm so glad you brought that up about the friends knowing. I don't know that like that is also like just like a part of who you are. Like it makes such a difference when people know the full you and then sort of find out about this like your sexual
Mm-hmm.
experience. Like I really want to like. I think that we amp like societally amp like sexual labels like virgin or not up to like carry this like massive weight of like even like personality traits. Like I think that like when you call somebody a virgin, like there's a lot of the like general things are like, oh, that person's probably like a nerd, antisocial, you know, stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
like that's such a tiny insignificant part of our identities, and it really doesn't like when you have sex for the first time, it's not like you have like a massive shift in who you are, you know? Nobody that doesn't occur for anybody. So I'm really glad you brought that point up that like it depends on how much people know about you, and that really impacts their um judgments. And I think that shows really clearly that it's such a stupid reason to like assume that you know somebody off of a sexual label like that. Yeah. And yeah, and I guess building off of that, like in youth culture, what do you think like the role of sex is? Like if any. Like I mean, in conversation, like how does it come up? Like is it I don't know. Like what's your take on that? And I can specify that question if but go ahead.
I think that's similar to like substance use and similar to um like party culture
Mm,
and fraternity and sorority culture. It's just like a quick way to bond with people
mm,
who you're otherwise not close with, especially in college. I feel like the reason why sex lives are overshared so much it is because it's just like a quick way to show someone like who or to give someone a perception of you
yeah.
uh, that you maybe want them to have.
Yeah.
People who are having a lot of sex and who are very loud about it
Mhm.
are probably searching for some sort of validation
Yeah.
from that decision. Um, yeah, I think that it plays similar roles to other parts of um,
Yeah.
like life in college and in general that like we assign um like you said like positive and negative connotations to, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like a quick get to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
kind of.
I love that answer, and that's something that I'm really trying to stress here is that like as societally that's it's so true is we're using it as like a you can't you can't use a sexual label like that or something like to like know somebody. You can't skip that step like that ever, you know? And I think like people yeah, I think that that makes sense is maybe why it exists or why this problem exists is that when you're in a big place and you're meeting a bunch of people for the first time, like for example like at Michigan, you know, we have 30K undergrad, like sort of maybe giving those little hints about like perhaps like who you are as a person, like that can sort of be a way for that, but like that's really it just doesn't it's not substantial enough to give any real meaning to who somebody is, you know. It maybe
Yeah,
can show like something about habits, but
yeah,
other than that like I'm complete but I love that point that you brought up.
yeah.
um
It's kind of like
yeah.
skipping a step, like trying
Yeah.
to like synthesize like intimate connection through like
Yeah.
sharing something
Yeah, whittle it all
that
down to
maybe.
one label stuff like a
Yeah,
whole characteristic, a whole personality and type of person into one label. I yeah, that's
yeah,
it's and it is crazy when we talk like when I like hearing myself say it, and that's true. Like that's a crazy thing that we do. And but I guess I don't know. I guess I can see why people do it, but it also is such a dangerous and like harmful thing. Like I don't know.
yeah.
Because then you don't know the person. You're automatically making judgments. And I guess I
Hmm.
want to like touch on that with you is like, um, like what's, I don't know, like how do you feel, do you ever feel I don't know, like how does being a virgin feel to you, like emotionally, like when you're in like around society, like I don't know, like do you feel, I don't, do you feel it as like sort of a negative thing that people try to make it out to be, or like what does that look like to you?
I think that it's never been something that I have been ashamed of because I've grown up in kind of like a family and a culture where that is expected of me.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that being a girl is different than
Yeah,
like being a guy
absolutely.
uh virgin. I think that for obviously just if we're talking about like gender and like sexual dynamics, like
Mm-hmm.
girls are girls are supposed to fit into um like a stereotypical like
Yeah,
delicate
much stricter labels. Yeah.
right, much different labels there. um but yeah, I do feel like when I share that with people, they are assuming that I've never been intimate with someone, or
Mm-hmm.
that I've never like um had mature
Yeah.
experiences with with someone before, or that I'm kind of like almost like underdeveloped, or like
Yeah.
have experienced less than they have, um because I haven't had sex before.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing is like we can like you having that experience, like you can like literally point to so many things in pop culture that like further that stereotype. Like I brought up the 40-year-old virgin earlier, and like the whole thing, it's like a joke. It's Steve Carell lives in his um in like an apartment alone with like action figures and video games, you know, as if he's like sort of making him out to be like a teenage boy type, like as if he
Yeah,
hasn't matured, you know, he's still stuck in
right.
that adolescent thing. And
Yeah,
like I was saying earlier, like it's just such a weird notion that we have that like having sex brings some like maturity and like intimacy to, like that doesn't make any sense. And you've like this another thing that I've wanted to bring up is like you've had like you've had multiple relationships and and meaningful relationships that didn't need to like depend on sex, you know, they were more than that. And like
yeah.
and I don't know, maybe you could touch on that, like what was your experience with that, because I also want to like for anybody listening in that is, you know, a virgin and looking to be in a relationship but not looking for that, like not willing to have sex, like how did you manage that, and dealing with expectations that maybe your partner came into concerning sex?
I think that that's super difficult to navigate, even if you're with the right person who is respectful of that. I think that a lot of the time, like abstinence gets taken as a form of rejection by
Mm,
people, um, which is just it's hard to explain to the person you're with that that decision has nothing to do with them, um, and is kind of it's entirely personal.
yeah.
But I think that when you're committed to someone, and what I think is beautiful about, obviously, if you choose to have sex, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But something that I think is beautiful about not having sex with someone is the ability to like place that passion into
Mm,
intimacy in other ways,
yeah.
and connecting with someone in other
Yeah.
ways. And I think that in my past relationships, that's been something that I've been very grateful for. Um,
Yeah.
is my ability to do that, and then obviously my partner's ability to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely has been a recurring point of contention in all of my relationships, just because of that, again, like that, probably comparing to others who are getting that in their from their relationships, and um feeling like you're being deprived or rejected, or things along those lines. It's not easy to explain and
Yeah, no, I get what you
someone
mean.
understand.
Yeah, no, but I love that about the you talked about the intimacy in other places in the relationship. Like, yeah, I think like sex is like we've been talking about, it's like just a real facet of things, a real like it's part of a maybe a little tiny part of a character. It can be a little tiny part of a relationship, but like I don't know, and I want to ask you about this and sort of wrapping it up, but like why do you think that we have this pressure to have sex? Like, why is there an expectation? Like, like, why are virgins in college and like freshman year, like, why is like, that the outlier, Like, I feel like in society too, and on TV shows and in movies, teenagers are always having sex, and are always doing this. And there's never any real representation of anybody who's like, like I choose not to have sex, or I am choosing not to have sex for religious reasons or anything like that. It's like even when you look in the media and in the conversations that people have, like there seems like a very tangible pressure. And I don't know, like have you experienced that pressure? And then if so, like why do you think that there is that pressure? Why does that exist?
That's a tough question.
Yeah. And you don't have to give any, just maybe like a theory, anything like that, because there's no right answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this today actually. I just I think that we're taught that sex is something, it's like a a, a, a means to an end a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and and that we are deserving of that means, and if we don't have it then we are
Mm.
missing like a fundamental piece of life,
Yeah.
and like of what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and I don't really think that's true. I think that there are so many other ways to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I don't really know what else to say for that one. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. I think like yeah, sex is racked up to be this like immense thing. Like I think even like in middle school you start hearing little whispers about it and people it's very something like, "Oh, like sex, like whoa,"
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
like from there, I feel like it almost becomes like a thing of being cool. Like when your friends sort of like start to have sex for the first time, it's like, "Whoa, like that's crazy." Like they're
Yeah.
almost like an adult or something,
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
like I don't, and so there's sort of like a social thing there where it's sort of like you mark that checklist off and that's one of your I don't know, you're an adult or something. And I think there's also another side to it is like a fear. I think it's a fear of being portrayed as a virgin, and like there's a pressure to have sex because of that. Like you want to escape all of the connotations and labels that come
Yeah.
with virginity. Like don't want to have don't want to be associated with that. You don't want to be called a nerd. You don't want to be called antisocial. You don't want to be called inexperienced, immature. Any of the terms that you brought up, feeling like, or and those connotations that like we assign to the term. Like I think people are sort of almost afraid of that and are willing to
Yeah.
like even in I think also like in social situations I definitely like me in the past too, like when people ask you like are you a virgin, sometimes I'm just like I would lie, like I think a lot of people would just lie to like escape that question, be like yeah, like oh no, of course I've had sex, and then the
Yeah.
person asking is like oh okay, and then you move on.
Yeah.
um but yeah, and like I just want to wrap this up by like I don't know, saying that like I think as we've talked, like June and I have been sort of uncovering is that like as a society there's a lot of different things, a lot of different ways that we're racking up and giving just these massive unwarranted ideas and behaviors, and I don't know, just like assigning them to virginity, and we're making it out to be as like a giant step, a necessary step in life and relationships, and but I'm so thankful for I'm so glad that you were able to come today and offer your perspective. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but I really appreciate hearing your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great conversation. I think it's important for these kind of things to be talked about, especially at our age.
Yeah.
You asked some great questions. Thanks, Max.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, June. Okay, thank you guys for listening. Signing off.